If you've been following the 2020 Democratic primary, you might have noticed that in a number of sources for news that aren't generally all that supportive of Senator Sanders and his bid, there have been more and more editorials saying, hey, he might actually have a chance, and sort of acknowledging some of what he brings to the race, his strength in the polls, all of that. One thing that I think might be influencing those recent takes that are like, hey, maybe Joe Biden doesn't have this thing, is that he has been sort of racking up these important endorsements, and the last 24 hours have been a great example of that. So I want to run through just a couple of the big endorsements that he's gotten that I think could matter going forward. The first from a group that you've heard about quite a bit on this show, and that's the Sunrise Movement.
Hi, my name is Varshini Prakash. I am one of the co-founders of and currently serving as the executive director for Sunrise Movement. We're endorsing Bernie Sanders for president because he has proven again and again and again that he understands this issue. He understands its scope. He understands the severity. He understands that it is a social justice issue, that it's about racial and economic justice, that it's about the fight of our lives. And he understands that this isn't just about a conversation happening in Washington. This is about changing the lives of millions of working people across this country for the better.
So they tweeted about this and said that this had been a vote of their membership. And if you care about climate change, and if you're interested in US activism around the climate crisis, there's really nothing bigger right now than the Sunrise Movement, which has been tapped into legislative efforts to do something about it. Their endorsement, I think, pulls an incredible amount of weight in this area, in an issue that for a lot of voters is the most important issue. And I understand that they're not saying that they hate all the other candidates. They recently released grades for Senator Sanders, Senator Warren, and Joe Biden as well. And they generally liked the first two, Joe Biden not quite as much. And I saw that Varshini Prakash, who you saw in that video, she had tweets that were very complimentary towards Elizabeth Warren earlier today, even after this endorsement has gone out. And so understand that he's not the only one that they think would be good on this issue, but they have put themselves behind him, and they did it very early, before any of the primaries, before any of the caucuses. That is a big show of support for Senator Sanders on an important issue. But it's not the only one. Let's also talk about the Dream Defenders, which did their endorsement of Bernie Sanders yesterday. They were initially formed to fight for justice for Trayvon Martin, but has since blossomed into a broader movement for freedom and liberation in Florida. Here's a bit of a video that they put out in support of Bernie Sanders yesterday.
In 2020, we are not electing a candidate. We are choosing a movement. We endorse affordable housing, livable wages, free education, a comprehensive universal healthcare system. We endorse justice that heals, not a system that locks our people up and throws away the key. We endorse clean drinking water and breathable air. We endorse a country without walls where children are free from cages. We endorse a free, flourishing democracy and the right to vote. We endorse us and the movement to elect Bernie Sanders for President of the United States of America.
And so what you see in both of those endorsements, that these are not exclusively youth organizations, but they do tend to be a little bit more shifted towards younger activists, like predominantly in Florida in one aspect, across the country in the other, but across a lot of issues as well. I mean, how many different issues did you just see in the video from the Dream Defenders there? And obviously the climate change and environment focused endorsement coming from the Sunrise Movement, which are incredibly important. And they show that where the most passion is in American politics, the strongest, most outspoken advocacy, those are generally the groups that are going not towards Buttigieg, not towards Joe Biden. They tend to be lining up behind Bernie Sanders. And considering that the national polls have effectively been pretty stagnant over the past couple of months, there's been some movement in the state polls. Maybe we'll look at those on tomorrow's show. But seeing these groups lining up before Bernie Sanders, not after he's already won a bunch of early states, but going out and doing it when it's risky, before the first votes, that is a big risky show of confidence, and I really do appreciate that. As a reminder of how important some of these things are to these groups, like the environmental support for Bernie Sanders that you just saw coming from the Sunrise Movement, I just saw today. We don't have time to go super in depth, but the EPA is changing one of their big regulations having to do with how permit bids for major infrastructure projects going forward, how that's gonna be changed. They're going to be taking out the consideration for effects on climate. So at the same time that you have all of this activism around the climate crisis, you have these major disasters going on around the world. The EPA is going to ease up on their concern for how major pipelines being built, those sorts of things are going to impact the climate going forward. The only way that we're going to stop that, because this doesn't have to go through the legislature, Trump and the EPA can just do it themselves for the most part, these sorts of things. The only way you're going to stop that is with a change at the top. And for that, you need a president who cares about these issues, and they clearly think that Bernie Sanders is the person. But also, again, if you want a youth activist, now we have an individual endorsement. I saw Bernie Sanders tweeting out. Actress and activist Emily Ratajkowski, she also had a video endorsing Bernie Sanders. Here's a section of that.
Women in this country have so much to lose as far as healthcare. This is a potential moment in the Supreme Court where Roe v. Wade could be overturned. So whoever's going to be our next Supreme Court justice will be up to the next president in the next 4 years. So it's very important to have someone who advocates for women's rights in position of power. I understand why sometimes it doesn't feel appealing to vote. And I think that's really important to talk about because a lot of people are like, how could people not vote? What's wrong with them? And I think it's, comes down to the fact that there aren't often candidates that represent the change that you want to see. They don't represent what you want for yourself. So it feels so distant and sort of unimportant. That's not the case in this election. There's so much at stake here. And getting out to vote, your one vote makes a change. We will regret it forever if we don't take this opportunity to join this movement.
So for that video and for the other two that I showed you, there's much more to it and you should definitely go track those down. The organizations and individuals have spread them. Also Bernie Sanders and his campaign have been tweeting them out as well. But they show the broad range of issues that people are now organizing around Bernie Sanders around. I'll say again, as I do whenever I talk about something like this, I myself have endorsed Bernie Sanders, so understand the bias that I bring to this sort of story. But I think you should know that these are some high profile endorsements that are all coming down in just the last 24 hours. I will say one more thing. This is not a formal endorsement, I just thought it was kind of funny. Larry David, who has been doing impressions of Bernie Sanders on SNL recently, he was on Stephen Colbert. And Stephen Colbert asked him, is there anything you would like me to ask Bernie tomorrow night? Larry David said, I would beg him to drop out so I don't have to keep flying from LA to do SNL. I thought when he had that heart attack, that would be it. I wouldn't have to fly in from LA. But he's indestructible, nothing stops this man. If he wins, do you know what that's going to do to my life? Do you have any idea? I mean, it'll be great for the country, terrible for me. Now, that is not an endorsement. It's not an endorsement, but it's pretty good, pretty good. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.